Hi, it's Blue Orange 22. Sorry about the hair. So I've been thinking about this story. I'm sure you've seen it, how 18 to 60-year-old men in the Ukraine aren't allowed to leave the country, of course, because of the war with Russia. And to me, this is an example of not so much male disposability, but rather the expectations that are placed upon men that I don't think that men get enough gratitude for. We talk a lot about gender roles and gender stereotypes and gender equality and feminism, but I often feel that the expectations placed upon men are so often ignored or something that men don't really get enough gratitude for. And first of all, I just want to say so it's clear, I'm very aware that there's a lot of heroic Ukrainian women who are staying behind to fight. So this is not at all, just so there's no confusion, me saying, oh, the women are just fleeing and the men are the heroes staying and fighting. I'm not saying that whatsoever because I've seen these videos and pictures of women doing it and they are heroes. This video is not even really about just Ukraine in particular. It's more in general. Society has certain expectations on men that are just kind of seen as the norm and that men never really seem to get any gratitude for. War being the most obvious one. It's just expected when there's a disaster for men to be the ones to ask to die. And that's just kind of a norm that no one ever really thinks anything of, and there's never really any sense of gratitude. And it starts, from smaller things, little everyday things like, oh, when there's an empty seat, the man should give the woman the seat. Or when there's a famine and there's not enough food, men are expected to be the ones to starve. When there's not enough room in a homeless shelter, men are expected to be the ones to be left outside to freeze. Whenever there's a situation where there's something negative, or there's not enough to go around, or someone has to choose the hard or the dangerous path, it's always men, or boys even, because 18 to 60, I mean, a healthy 27-year-old woman is not expected to stay in fights, whereas an 18-year-old boy is forced to stay and fight. And again, I know there's many women in the Ukraine who are staying and they're heroic, so this is not me blaming anybody with the exception of Vladimir Putin. But it's just in general, society talks a lot about women's unpaid labor, but very little is talked about men have this constant unpaid labor as we're always the ones on call when it really comes down to a war or a disaster or a famine or even something as small as the last seat on the bus. It's always assumed to be the male. It's always assumed to be the man or the boy who is to be given the worst choice or the less comfortable choice. And just consider for a second the role that men have in our society that never really gets shown any appreciation. Look at some of the more male dominated professions: electricians, plumbers, garbage men, the people that drive the trucks that take the food from the farm to the grocery store. The majority of those workers are men. So just imagine if you were to have a man strike for a second. Really picture if all of those people were to stop working. You wouldn't really be able to have time to go out and bang pots and pans because you'd be dead and you'd be starving. So I'm trying to wrap my head around, if I was in the Ukraine right now at 28 years old, I would be kind of like the prime fighting age. I would be expected right now to stay in a place where there are bombs falling on cities and missiles falling around me. But instead of being on a truck or bus driving away from the explosions, it's my expectation to drive towards those explosions. And that's always kind of been a male experience that I don't think really gets enough attention or gratitude when we talk about gender privilege and privileges of each gender and gender oppression and how men have it easy or women have it easy or whatever it is. I think there's a lot to be said about both sides of the equation that I don't think we have an equal balance in the conversation.